Good morning, everyone. We are just waiting a few seconds more to everyone to find us here. So I think we will start now. Good morning, everyone, and most welcome to the release of the European Martech Report 2023. I am Annette Sannefelt and the CEO of Swedma, the Swedish Data Marketing Association. And Swedma is one of 4 organizations who is behind this study. And we are digging into these challenges and the maturity in the Martech area. The other organizations behind it is CMOs Ghost Tech, Odyssey, and Viraya. And I'm very glad that we have Malin Wahlberg from Viraya and Mikael Alinde from Odyssey here to present some of the findings and insights we got from this year's study. And also we will have another guest. Malin will introduce her, you heard me, soon. Before I let you introduce yourself more closely, I would like to say to all of you that we will be very glad if you will, attend the chat. You will find it right in the screen. Ask questions to Malin and Mikael, and please take part in the polls that we will turning up during the presentations. And after this webinar, we will share the presentation, a link to the full report where you can also crunch the data and maybe find your own insights. So I think I stop there and leave it over to you and Malin. A warm welcome to both of you. Please let us through.
Today is Martech report from Mikael. We'll look at the 6 main insights from this year report, and then we have a guest that I will be presenting shortly. But first, Mikael, tell us about the report and the background.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Pleased to meet you all. This year's Martech report is the 6th consecutive report. We started in 2017. What is different this year is that previously we've been focusing on Martech professionals working in the Swedish market for companies of different kind. This year we have reached out to 10 markets across Europe, all the Nordic markets, Germany, France, UK, Belgium, Italy, and maybe I forgot some of them, but this is a real interesting data set we have this year. Overall, we have collected close to 2,300 interviews distributed across these markets. So this is a very robust data set, and you will have the opportunity to dig deeper in this data set yourselves within the web report. We have interviewed only Martech professionals ranging from C-level to entry level to get a sort of distributed picture of the state of Martech currently. All data was collected during May this year together with our panel partner Sint and a web survey methodology. Over to you, Malin.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So as Annette mentioned, we're 4 organizations behind this report. You see them here. So my name is Malin Wahlberg. I'm CEO at Viraya, and as you already met Mikael, he's working at Odyssey. We also have the pleasure of having one of the cases from the report here today. So we have Charlotte Pålman, Head of Business Development Northern Europe at Google. So we will ask her some questions along the way, and she will also share some of her views and Google's views on some of these topics throughout the presentation. I also want to extend a special thanks to the agency Added, who has helped to create a fantastically looking digital report. With that said, let's get started. And first off, we just want to clarify what we mean when we talk about Martech. So you might agree with this definition or not, but this is just to put us all on the same page in terms of what is Martech. So here, as you can see, it's business strategies combined with technology in order to be more customer focused. And it's important to emphasize here that what we put in the word business strategies includes several dimensions, and we will cover those in these presentations, but those dimensions being people, process, technology, and data. So this means that Martech for us is much, much more than the technology itself. And we hope that this Martech report will be your guide in how you can succeed with Martech. And if we first just take a look at the tech perspective, you can see that there's obviously an abundance of tools. So just looking at that perspective, it is a rapidly growing area and has been so for several years. And that is, of course, putting even more pressure and challenges on companies to succeed in the area. And I think that brings us to the first insight in this year's report, that is actually not only about tech. So in order to be successful within Martech, you need to focus and understand the importance of all 4 dimensions. So as I said, for an organization to truly succeed with Martech, it involves driving a transformation and change within all of these 4 areas. So simply put, people are the competence you need in the right place where you need them in order to succeed. Processes are the ways of working to make best use of Martech. Technology, we looked at the Scott Brinker overview with all the tech tools. So it's a matter of finding and making sure you have the right tools for what you need. And then last but definitely not least, data, to make sure you have the right structure and right data models to make the Martech data available and actionable. So going into the first survey question here, what we have looked at is the self-rated overall Martech maturity. So each respondent has rated themselves and their own organization in relation to peers in the industry. So we can see that around half of the respondents put their company Martech maturity level on an average level. 29% rate themselves on the higher end of the scale, so a high to a very high degree of maturity, and 22% rate themselves on the lower end of the scale. So there's definitely room for improvement here. Well, when looking at the overall Martech maturity, depending on the company size that you're working in, we can see a big difference between high turnover companies and low turnover companies. So if we look at the upper scale here, we can see that within the respondents from high turnover companies, 54% rate themselves as high or very high in terms of Martech maturity, and only 12% on the low turnover companies. And I think that the simple and maybe too simple explanation here as well is that higher turnover companies have more muscles, both manpower and financially, to focus on this. So when we look at the overall maturity rating per dimension, we can see that the dimensions, technology and data, companies seem to be more mature in those areas. So they have a slightly higher share of top raters compared to the people and process dimension. So we can see this both for high turnover companies and low turnover companies. So there is definitely a tendency for companies to be very much focused on one or two of the dimensions in their efforts to succeed in Martech. So they are sort of risking to fail to consider the entire journey and the entire transformation that needs to be done. So why is that? Well, one of the reasons for this, we believe, is that technology is more tangible and it's easy to grasp. So you can put requirements, you can foresee the outcome of a successful implementation, whereas the softer perspectives might be easier to not to consider or not to fully understand the complexity of having them implemented in a successful way. So a first question to you, Charlotte, do you recognize this importance rating in terms of maturity and focus for companies?
Thank you, Malin, and morning, everyone. Good to be here. And yes, we do recognize this scenario. I think that we at Google, and I work specifically at Google Marketing Platforms, have been looking at this for several years as well, of course, and we also meet a lot of clients and discuss these things. And it shows very similar results. We have also conducted a study earlier together with BCG that also shows the importance of especially the people and the processes, because buying technology is one thing, and that's usually the first start that companies start and marketeers start to do. And then there's the issue of people and processes, how to either recruit the right skills or retaining that talent, also if one works in-house, but also in order to perhaps work with external partners and consultants to help out with this. And not only the people, of course, the processes is just as important, because it's really important to break down the silos here and work together so that the marketing people get access to the data, and of course they have access to the technology first, but that's needed across the organization.
And there's definitely a lot of dependencies, and we can see that when we look at the Martech focus areas for the coming years, we can see that 52% out of all respondents state that improving processes and ways of working to make best use of Martech is the top focus area moving forward. So hopefully this means that organizations have realized, as you're saying, Charlotte, as well, the importance of the softer dimensions and really putting efforts and spending resources in solving this. So that is looking positive from that perspective. And when looking at the top challenges, so we've asked the question, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges you face trying to achieve the goals behind your company's investments in Martech? Here we see that challenges related to lack of insight and lack of tools are not as commonly mentioned. So these two actually come in at only 9% and 13%, stating that these are top challenges. So these seems to be things that companies have gotten further in solving, so to say, whereas the biggest challenges faced by companies are stated as lack of budget, lack of time, and lack of competence, with lack of budget, so the budget constraints being rated as the most significant challenge here. So this, of course, highlights the financial limitations that organizations encounter to really leverage Martech. And when we compare these main challenges to previous years, we can see that the lack of competence and lack of time has been on this the top list for several years now. But overall, we see that the data suggests that organizations have realized the importance of working with both people and process dimensions in order to get the most value out of the Martech area. So that is very nice to see. So what does success within Martech mean? What are the companies that are doing it right? What are they doing? Well, to start with, we can see that top management involvement and competence is key to succeed. We can see that this throughout the report, and you will see more examples of this during this presentation. So one example here is that the level of top management involvement in Martech has a profound impact on your ability to attract relevant competence. So when top management involvement is high, we can see that 48% of the respondents say that it's relatively easy to attract competence. And on the other side of the scale, so to say, we can see that when top management involvement is low, it's only 3% of those respondents saying that it's easy to recruit. But looking at top management, here we find a really interesting discrepancy in the self-rating. So when we look at the question, in your opinion, does top management and the board members have the right competence to achieve the goals behind your company's investment in Martech? So when looking at this, in many of the top rating companies, top management themselves holds a strong belief of their own competence and the involvement in this area. But when we look at the entry point respondents, they are not at all agreeing to that view. So we can see a big discrepancy here. And Charlotte, I'm eager to hear what you think here. Are you surprised by this discrepancy?
Perhaps not. I think that there are more involvement from top management and also buy-in. We see that from our clients. But I would also say that Martech is a little bit complicated and difficult to understand thoroughly. So perhaps the buy-in is more on a shallow level. And I think that we also see that a lot of the more Martech or programmatic or buy-in of technology decisions and so on usually are getting pushed down in the organization.
Yeah, so whether or not you agree to this discrepancy, I think there are some polls as well in the chat. So please help us and answer those so we see, based on the participants here today, what is your view on this in terms of top management involvement? But having them involved, and then we of course mean that they're actually involved and not only believe so themselves. So the true involvement, here we can see some industries that stand out in terms of they seem to have that in place already. Those being software and IT services, manufacturing, corporate services, arts, and real estate. And we will get to the comparison between these 10 different markets that Mikael was talking about as well. But one company that really stands out here is Germany, where 43% of the respondents state that they have a top management that is highly involved. And I think Claes, that joined us on the event from Google the other day, had a nice, I don't know if it's an explanation, but a nice reasoning behind this, stating that, yeah, well, you have the different cultural aspects, and Germany is very hierarchical. So you would not get approval for a Martech investment without having it going all the way up to top management. Do you have an addition or a comment to that, Charlotte, from your perspective? Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I would agree. Because I can see that for primarily Swedish companies that I work with, you see that that decision is quite often made by the people that works more operational and tactical with it.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah. And as I said, we'll get back to the different markets a little bit later in this presentation. So another thing that is connected to top management involvement seems to be the willingness to invest. So for organizations that are fortunate enough to have sufficient Martech companies on top management level, 37% of those respondents say that their Martech budgets are expected to increase in the coming years. And comparing this with companies with low Martech companies in top management, only 18% say that the budgets are expected to increase. And one of the main insights in this year's report is that Martech evidence seems to be lacking across all 10 markets in this survey. We'll take a look at that in a second, but let's sort of take a more positive outlook and say, okay, but what does really set companies apart as an attractive employer? How can you attract talent? Well, the survey's findings suggest that companies that experience less challenges in terms of finding and attracting talent have top management support and involvement. They are putting investments in Martech in the coming years, and they have a willingness to embrace new technology like AI and so on. So in many countries, finding Martech competence is a challenge, but it also is important to work with these three areas in order to retain the talents you have. And you touched upon that a bit earlier as well, Charlotte. So conclude for this insight, we can see that having or making sure that you get top management on board is the #1 key to succeed. So it will have positive domino effects leading to increased MarTech budget, willingness to experiment and implement in new technologies such as AI, and will also make your company a more attractive employer, and then also making it easier to recruit. So, as mentioned in the introduction, this report is based on respondents rating themselves in terms of the different dimensions and different areas within MarTech. And we can see that there are big differences in the self-rating per market. And one of these examples we can see when we look at the overall MarTech maturity of your company. So when looking at this self-rating and looking at the average for all respondents, as I said in the beginning, 29% of all respondents rate their company on the upper scale of MarTech maturity, so a 4 or a 5. When looking at Finland as an example here, only 14% of the respondents make the same rating. And then we can see for Germany, 42% of the respondents claim to have a high or very high level of MarTech maturity. So it is worth noting here that Finnish respondents consistently rate themselves lower than average throughout the entire MarTech study. And on the other hand, German respondents are rating themselves higher than average within the study. So they seem to hold a more optimistic view regarding their own maturity level. So why is that? We touched upon this a little bit. So how do we explain these big differences between markets? Is Finland actually on a much lower maturity level than, for example, Germany? Or what could be an explanation here? Well, we think that one factor really influencing these type of self-rating is the so-called innovation curve. So as mentioned, the respondents are rating themselves and assess their own organization in relation to other organizations they are familiar with and have experience in. So Finland here is one example of this, where we see that the Finnish market was an early adopter in MarTech, both in terms of technologies and ways of working. So they have likely surpassed the first initial peak of excitement, where new technologies were seen as something that could solve everything and all the challenges. So currently they have reached a stage of realizing that it takes more than just the new tech tools to be really successful. On the other hand, Germany entered the innovation curve later compared to Finland. So it's likely positioned at the peak of the initial phase, giving a more optimistic view on the challenges and the opportunities within this area. So when looking at the main reasons and goals behind investments, we can see that Finland seems to already have made substantial investments in data and technology and is now prioritizing the dimensions of people and competence. So looking at the overall here, and now we're looking specifically at the respondents stating that the goal behind their investment is to access new technology. So 38% of all respondents say that access to new technology is the main goal. And this number for Finland is dropping down then to 25, and for Germany, it's higher at 44. This is also evident when we look at the investments in MarTech moving forward. So 43% of the Finnish respondents anticipate an increase in the MarTech budget. The average here you see at 54, and both then Germany, UK, and Denmark, as well as Norway, rating themselves higher in terms of they are predicting that more respondents are predicting that their investments in MarTech will increase in the coming years. So coming back to the top management involvement, how is that looking for the different markets? So around 1/3 of the respondents from Denmark, UK, Germany, and Norway indicate that top management is highly involved and possess the necessary competence. In contrast, we can see that only around 20% of the respondents from Austria, France, and Finland are giving the same rating. So these findings really clarify the different level of top management involvement, or at least perceived top management involvement between the different countries. But another thing that surprised me a bit here, it's really highlighting the, generally speaking, low level of Martech competence on C-level across all markets. So as you see here, only 29% of respondents are stating that top management are highly involved. Charlotte, what's your take on this? It seems that we have a big challenge, all of us, ahead of us, or what do you say?
Tools, implementing it, start working with it, and then you have fixed it more or less. But what more mature companies see is that the further you work around the digital maturity track, it also gets more complicated. And for example, it's so important that top management are involved with helping out also in terms of breaking down the silos. And one concrete example is, for example, CRM data. In order to be very efficient with your marketing technology, you need access to your CRM data, but that is usually living in another part of the organization. So that's one example where top management is needed to be involved. Another part that is definitely increasing more and more is because of all the regulatory changes we're seeing with GDPR and other regulatory frameworks. It's also important with legal involvement. So make sure that legal has its saying, and in bigger companies, the data protecting officers, what can be done with our data and how should it be used in a GDPR safe way, but also in a sense that makes it possible for marketeers to do something valuable out of it. I would say this comparison between countries, perhaps we don't see the exact same thing here, because we also see that the Nordics are in front here in digital maturity, but also in the usage of programmatic tools overall. I would say that the Nordics and also the Netherlands and UK we see as front runners in this field, and we see that the other markets, for example, Germany is behind a couple of years here. So that is probably you are having something with your theory here with a innovation curve.
Do you have any quick advice in terms of, if you work in an organization where you feel like, oh, we're definitely not there in terms of management involvement, what's your best advice to sort of how to fix that if you're not on top management level yourself, so to say?
Yeah, I think that it's good to advocate for it internally and try to educate top management. Send them to Google's executive breakfasts, doing a little bit of commercial here. But Google is really trying to evangelize this message also on top management level, because we see how much easier it becomes for the more marketeer, operational people when you have the top management involvement. But it is a thing about education, but also showing up success. And since this is complicated and it's a long road of working with it, it's good to have early wins where you showcase that this is actually working. Right now, it's harder financial times as well. So in those times, companies always tend to go to the more safe bets. One is more sales focused. The KPIs are getting stricter. and so on. And that does not help Martech all the time, since it's still new and it's a test and learn culture, and it's also easy from a marketing perspective to go back to last click and not think about the whole attribution and the consumer journey. So it is about helping top management understand all these pillars, I would say.
Yeah. And as you were saying a bit as well, seeing, can we find KPIs that where the Martech success is reflected or attributed to, so you can actually prove a case as you would do with a prospective client. You would have maybe an ROI or a business case showing this is what it can lead to speak the same language as top management would usually do, so to say. And then, of course, as you say as well, educate and help build that knowledge.
But I very much agree with what you're saying, but also make sure that you talk the same language, just as you're saying. So connecting the Martech strategies with the business objectives, so everyone talks the same language. Essentially.
Definitely. Great. So looking at insight number 4, what has happened since previous years, and what we saw last year is also related to the Martech investments, and if they are expected to increase, stay the same, or decrease. So looking at the Martech report from 2021, we can see that 70% of the respondents said that their Martech investments would continue to increase in the coming years. Last year, we saw that number dropped down to 36%. And this year, we can see that the predicted investments have recovered. So 54% of all the respondents state that Martech investments are expected to increase in the coming years. And looking at the other side of the scale, so looking at the number of respondents stating that Martech investments are expected to decrease, we can also see this recovery here compared to last year, when 12% expected budgets to decrease, and this year it's back to only 3%. Notably here, we can see for Norway and UK, they are even more optimistic, with over 60% of respondents from these countries indicating that budgets are expecting to increase. In last year's report, we saw that Sweden seemed to be falling behind, and that was both maybe, I don't know if it was a shock, but at least a bit of a disappointment in terms of where Sweden landed in last year's survey, where we saw that we were at the bottom of the low raters in that study. But if we compare to all the respondents and all the 10 markets, we can see that Sweden is actually landing somewhere in the middle. And when looking at the Nordic markets, so looking at the overall Martech maturity for the different Nordic markets in the study, we can see that Norway and Denmark are rating themselves a little bit higher compared to Sweden, with Norway being in the forefront of the entire Martech study. And here again, you see the low rating from the Finnish respondents compared to the other markets. So, as I mentioned before, Martech competence seems to be lacking across all markets. So we have touched upon this topic before, but let's take a deeper look at this. So to start off, we can see that 70% of all respondents state that they are lacking resources or have resources but lack the right skills in order to achieve their Martech goals. And this actually means that only 3 in 10 companies actually feel that they are well positioned today with having the right people and the skills in the right place to achieve their Martech goals. So there is some improvement to be done here. So half of the respondents say that there is a general lack of Martech competence in the market. So not only within their own company, there is also a lack to recruit this and find this in their market. So Sweden here, closely followed by France and UK, seem to have an even bigger challenge here, stating that the general lack of competence is the main factor that contributes to their recruitment difficulties. And we see also, as you mentioned in the beginning, Charlotte, that companies adopt various approaches in order to bridge this gap. So it could be utilizing consultants, hiring partners, training their own staff, and also recruiting, of course, new talents. So throughout the competence and recruitment related topics in the Martech questionnaire, we can see that Sweden seems to be experiencing an even greater challenge. And you can read more about this in the full report. This view is also shared, for example, with one of our cases in this year's study, Tele2, that they have actually actively changed their recruitment strategy to put less emphasis on actual Martech competence in the people they hire, and rather look for right personality skills that they then train internally and to educate them yourself. So Charlotte, what's your view on this? Is this a challenge also for you at Google to recruit talent?
I'm not sure if it's a problem for Google. We are in a fortunate situation, Google here also, about being one of the technology leaders in digital marketing. So I think perhaps that is easier for us to recruit. But I'm also going to add to that we have an extensive education program within Google to also teach and learn everyone. So even me that has been working at Google for 15 years, I have quarterly targets on courses and product upskills I need to take in order to stay on top of all the products. So I would say that even if you are recruiting external people with experience for Martech, it's very important to stay relevant here because things are changing so much. So I think it can be a good approach, just as Tele2 is doing, to educate internal resources, because we need more people on the ground in Sweden as well as in the Nordics and Europe, I would say, that knows Martech. I think that the digital marketing community is quite big now, since digital marketing has grown so much over the last 10-15 years. But the skills within Martech specifically, the programmatic products, the analytics, and so on, are much more difficult to find than more like Google Ads search, social skills, and so on. So good that everyone is pitching in also to this talent pool and increase of awareness.
Yeah, exactly. And just as you said as well, the development is moving so quickly that even though if you're up to date today, if you don't continue learning, you will be outdated maybe in 3 to 6 months, depending on what area you're working in. So that's, of course, a really important note. And thank you for that addition as well. This is a living thing, so to say. And I think that brings us to the last insight of this year's report. So you cannot talk about Martech this year without talking about AI. So artificial intelligence has really exploded in 2023 following the introduction of generative AI. But what we can see in this study is that despite the hype, 39% of all respondents are not planning to use AI anytime soon. We'll get back to that in a second. So looking more positively then first, what industries are in the forefront within this area? So we can see the ones closest to the actual technology tools themselves, so hardware, software, network, IT services, and design. But when looking at the plans ahead, there are a couple of industries standing out that seems to be more ready than others, those being finance, entertainment, and consumer goods. But as mentioned here on the intro slide, so we've asked a question in the study, do you work or plan to work with AI solutions? Whereas 61% of respondents state that they're either already do or plan to do so within the coming 1 to 2 years. But 39% of the respondents state that they're not planning to use AI, either not at all or not within 3 to 5 years. And out of the ones who are not there yet, so to say, we can see that the main barrier being that they struggle to find the value of AI. So they have problems seeing what will AI bring value to our organization. We can see that the number of companies that state this being the top barrier differs a bit depending on if you're a high turnover company or low turnover company, whereas high turnover companies are more stating the second barrier here, that they don't want to use or don't know how to approach AI due to ethics and morality. And in third place, we see the barrier of lacking the necessary competence to use AI, which is a struggle for around 15% of the respondents. So any comments here, Charlotte, to this?
Yes. AI is, of course, something that is widely discussed and top of mind for everyone in our industry and beyond our industry as well. And I think that, first of all, what is AI? ChatGPT was released, and suddenly everyone started to think around AI, around these more large language models and generating text, such as ChatGPT and also Google's correspondence Bard is doing. And I mean, that has been widely used and are saving time for work at groups such as copywriters, web developers, and so on. But AI is much bigger than just the generative text things. At Google, we are integrating AI in all of our products, like photo recognition is one example. Google Translate is very much relying on AI. So Google Search and Google Maps is very much AI as well. So I think that people and companies are using AI in a much larger extent than they think they're doing already. And I know that both we and our competitors on the more working space products such as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, a lot of AI integrations are happening here as well in order to get ramped up with summary of text, creating PowerPoints as a shell to save time, and then you can start doing adjustments. So I think that a lot is happening here, and you don't need, as a company, to develop AI from scratch and own models. For more advanced companies that has a lot of data, like for example in the financial industry, that are used to work with analytical, then I understand they are ranking themselves higher also, because perhaps they see the possibility of working with more AI models around all the data modeling. It's closer to their core competence. So I think that it's good to also broaden the scope what AI is, and that you don't need to build it from scratch. You can also use what's existing out there.
Yeah, and you, as you're saying as well, Charlotte, you probably already are, at least in your private life, but potentially also as a company, because it's included in some of the products and services you're already using today. Not necessarily meaning that you're building your own AI model in-house, so to say, but you have it included in other services that you're.
And if I just can add on we're discussing marketing technology now, that is one of the industries that has come furthest, because it's a lot of AI built into the marketing technologies that we as technology providers are getting out there on the programmatic platforms such as DV360, within our web analytics tool such as Google Analytics, and similar with our competitors, of course. But it's a lot of AI modeling already happening within those tools.
Thanks. So when we look at the AI adoption per country, you can see the 10 markets in the study represented here. So you can see that France and Germany stand out as having significantly higher than the other markets, with more than 70% of the businesses on these markets state that they already have implemented AI or plan to do so within the coming 1 to 2 years. This number is significantly lower for Austria and Finland at the bottom here. So there are some differences in terms of how respondents rate their AI adoption. And we talked a lot about top management support and so on before, but we can also see that AI implementation is strongly linked to company turnover or company size. So looking at the high and medium turnover companies, between 69 to 72, as you can see here, of the respondents state that their companies already are using or planning to use AI, whereas if we look at the low turnover companies, this number drops down to 49%. So again, more muscles means higher ability to move into new technologies quicker. So looking then, as you were saying a bit, Charlotte, we're looking at the Martech area, but within which areas do they see the main implementation taking place? And here we can see marketing and communication and IT technologies coming in on top here within the implementation areas. Then we took a look at what are the implementation areas stated per job level. And here we could see that top management seems to have much higher expectation on the potential contribution AI will bring in terms of tech and customer benefits. But we don't see that same positive outlook when looking, for example, at middle management. They seem to see less potential, or maybe have a more realistic view about the actual things required in order to successfully implement AI technology and usage. Any comment here, Charlotte, in terms of the discrepancy again we see here with top management compared to other job levels?
I think that in AI, we are in the early phase. There's a lot of high expectations on what AI actually can deliver. And with high expectations, one can also be a little bit not overly impressed exactly what you see today that you can actually do. So I think it is some kind of a little bit disappointment initially. But with that said, I work at Google, and the Google point of view is that AI is transformational, and we have only seen the beginning of it, and this will definitely change a lot going forward. So it is not something that will disappear and we have something new in 2 years. We've only seen the beginning of what AI actually can do for us in our industry as well as in other industries. So I think more to come on this area.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that's a nice closing mark in terms of the 6 main insights. And in the web report, you can read a lot more about this. And you also have a data crunching section when you can go in and compare the different markets on detailed questions asked in the survey and so on. So we will send out that link. So please go in and have a look and crunch away. So in the report, you will, on top of having the insights, see several cases and interviews. We will add more cases and interviews here throughout this fall. But I'm guessing you already understood, we have one of those cases here today. So Charlotte, with not that much time left to spare, I think we can start off with sort of what would be your main tips in terms of succeeding with Martech? What are the keys to success within this area from your perspective?
I think that your study is very much on top of it, what is needed. It is both the technology that needs to be in place and make sure that that technology is future-proof. We talk a lot about that. Third-party cookies are getting deprecated and new challenges are coming. So make sure that technology is working also not just this year, but also after 2024. And make sure that working with data I'm using your framework here because I think it's good. Make sure that data is accessible to the marketeers, and have that legal DPO input as well on what kind of data that can be used, and make sure that all aspects are getting accounted here. If marketing can choose, they will use all the data. If legal is choosing, they will not use any data. And the truth is perhaps somewhere in the middle, just so one is aware about that. And continue to invest in people and the processes, both in terms of in-house and internal personnel. Make sure that they attend trainings, courses, and have a test and learn climate within the company, and perhaps have a I touched upon the harder financial climate now with very strict KPIs. Make sure that you don't kill the innovation within that sphere with just focusing on the results. I know results and sales are crucial for even companies' existence right now, so I don't want to be go too far away with it, but make sure that there is still a test and learn culture and the processes to make sure that different parts of the organization work together. So I think the study is great and showcasing exactly what we see at Google.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Annette, do we have any questions or any interesting insights from the polls? I don't hear you, Annette. I don't know if that goes for everyone. You seem to be muted.
Yes.
Classic online.
Classic online, even after 3 years of training. I was saying that your advertising, Charlotte, was working. We got the question from a friend of us from Brussels, asking if you threw this breakfast even in that market.
You mean Google's overall executive breakfast? Yes.
Yes.
We have programs in every market. So yes.
Great. Then Robin will be happy, I think. And now I also saw that we got something more in the chat. Do you think the upcoming AI Act and privacy regulation in general will add an additional challenge to Martech?
Do you want to answer, Charlotte?
Yes, I can start. Yes, it will be more complicated moving forward. And everyone that works in this field will need to understand the dynamics here, what's possible to do and what's not possible to do, and act accordingly to follow local as well as more European Union legislations. So definitely, suddenly the marketeers also need to know a little bit of legal. I think that is something that has happened the last years in our industry.
Yeah,
and I think it will, from my perspective, it will follow a bit what we saw when GDPR was first launched. There's no best practice or benchmark to compare with. So in the beginning, some organizations tend to be very, very, very careful and don't dare to do anything. Whereas as time follows, you learn how to navigate and also how to interpret the different legislations. And I heard someone saying that, well, maybe it will be a little bit more complicated in EU with this AI Act, but it also will mean that it will be a solid market that will be seen as a very safe setup. So in that sense, the quality perspective would probably be beneficial moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you. And I agree. The chat is nothing more in the chat. So I will say thank you, everyone. And a special thank to you, Malin, Mikael, and Charlotte, of course. Exciting insights. And it's clear that we still have many challenges, but also opportunities, of course, ahead of us in the Martech area. As both me and Malin have said before, we will send a presentation and the link to the full report after this webinar. And if you have any questions at all, or you want us to come out and speak more about the report and the Martech with you, please reach out. Now, thank you everyone for your time, and have a nice Thursday, I think.
Yes, you're right. Have a nice Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you later.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.